The golden age of Silicon Valley is sitting on a cliff's edge. For decades, we operated under a comfortable assumption. Whoever controls the most advanced lithography machines controls the future of AI, defense, and the global economy. We built a fortress around this idea, banking on the belief that if we cut off the supply of extreme ultraviolet machines, the rest of the world would hit a wall. But the walls are not just failing, they are becoming irrelevant. Huawei just proved that our geopolitical leverage is not as permanent as we believed. By bypassing silicon, they are attempting to render our current manufacturing dominance obsolete. This is not an abstract lab experiment. It is a direct shot at the economic engine that sustains the average American household. Every app you use, the reliability of your power grid, the banking systems that track your savings, and the military hardware that secures your borders, it all runs on silicon. If that architecture becomes vulnerable to a new, non-Western standard, the cost of everything from your smartphone to your national security will undergo a violent, unpredictable shift. We are looking at the exact moment the tide turned, and I am going to show you why the most dangerous piece of technology Huawei has ever produced is also the most laughably primitive-looking device you have ever seen. Imagine a computer chip that is arguably the most important invention of the decade, yet it is so fundamentally broken by modern standards that it would be outperformed by a toaster from 1985. It is a paradox that makes no sense. You would look at this chip on a lab bench and assume it is a failure, a discarded student project. And yet this is the hardware forcing the world's most powerful semiconductor CEOs to stay awake at night. There is a specific reason why this chip is intentionally designed to be slow, and that reason is the key to unlocking a future where our export controls no longer matter. For 60 years, we lived in the shadow of Moore's law. We took silicon, etched patterns into it, and shrank those patterns every 18 months. Smaller transistors meant faster speeds and more intelligence per square inch. It was a beautiful, predictable march toward total efficiency. But physics doesn't care about our roadmaps. We pushed silicon to the point where transistors are only a few atoms wide. Now the electrons behave like ghosts. They don't follow the wires, they tunnel through the insulation. They leak. We hit the hard ceiling of the atomic world. We created the most complex, expensive, and fragile supply chain in history just to keep squeezing a few more nanometers out of silicon. We'd locked Huawei out of that chain, assuming that without our machines, they would be trapped in the past. We thought we had the board locked down. Huawei realized they could never pick that lock, so they decided to burn the door down. They searched for a material that didn't need to be shrunk because it was already thin by definition. They found molybdenum disulfide. It is a two-dimensional material, a sheet of atoms only 3 layers thick. At this thickness, electrons behave perfectly. They stay in their lanes, they don't leak. It solves the primary problem currently killing silicon, yet it remained trapped in university labs because nobody could figure out how to scale it. You could make one transistor, maybe 10, but you couldn't make a functional processor. The performance was erratic. Until this year, what they built, the Mengqi-1000, is the world's first parallel processor based on this 2D technology. Most people miss the significance of parallel. Previous 2D attempts were bit serial. They could only handle one piece of data at a time. They were crawling. Huawei's chip is the first to process multiple bits simultaneously. It is a fundamental architecture leap. They crammed over 9,000 transistors into a single square millimeter. It is the first time a non-silicon chip has matched the density of mature silicon manufacturing. It supports parallel multi-bit data input and output, operating at 43 kHz, and integrates core modules like an instruction decoder, register file, and ALU directly on the chipset to avoid memory bottlenecks. By using a 3-row layout instead of the traditional 2-row, they balanced noise margin and transistor area, achieving a uniformity that was previously thought impossible. Let's be clear, this chip won't replace your high-end processor today. It is, by modern benchmarks, remarkably slow, but you need to stop thinking about this as a product and start thinking about it as a proof of concept for a new world order. Because the global industry is held together by a fragile, hyper-expensive web of machinery, specifically EUV lithography machines the size of a school bus, under a global mandate to stay out of Chinese hands. By forcing Huawei out of the silicon game, the West inadvertently forced them to skip the most expensive stage of industrial evolution. We are still trying to make our cars run on a teaspoon of fuel. They are building a high-speed rail. The Mengqi-1000 uses RISC-V, an open-source instruction set. It isn't owned by the US or any Western power. It is a set of blueprints anyone can use. When you combine an open-source instruction set with a 2D material that doesn't require forbidden lithography machines, you have created a sovereign path for computing. You have exited the global technology grid that relies on Western compliance. Now, remember that curiosity gap? Why is the slowness its greatest feature? If you build a processor for speed, you fight a losing battle against heat, power, and physical decay. You are working within the suffocating constraints of what silicon can tolerate before it melts. But when you strip away the need for raw speed, you unlock architectural efficiency. The researchers weren't trying to win a race. They were proving that the logic folding architecture, stacking circuits like floors in a skyscraper, was stable at an atomic scale. By keeping the clock speed low, they verified that every single one of those 9,000 transistors functioned perfectly without the interference that usually crashes non-silicon designs. They were building the foundation of a house while everyone else was still arguing about how to make the bricks thinner. There is a concept here called the Tau scaling law. While traditional engineers remain obsessed with shrinking transistors, this law focuses on internal data latency. How fast does a signal move from point A to point B? If you minimize that path, you don't need to shrink the transistor to near-atomic levels to gain massive performance. Huawei's shift toward this principle is the ultimate tell. They aren't building a better silicon chip, they are building a different machine that ignores the rules of the old one. In circuit theory, the Greek letter tau represents a time constant. How quickly a signal swings from one state to another without getting bogged down by resistance and capacitance. By optimizing this constant rather than just physical size, Huawei is treating the chip as a fluid system rather than a static map of gates. The race is no longer about how small you can carve a transistor, it is about how fast you can stop the signal from dying in the wire. When you hear that Huawei is iterating on hundreds of chip variations based on this logic, you have to understand that they aren't just experimenting, they are deploying. They are shoving this architecture into everything from smartphone processors to AI accelerators. By the time the rest of the world finishes debating whether 2D materials are ready, Huawei will have spent years optimizing the manufacturing. Beyond the lab, there is the issue of materials integration. For decades, we have been using silicon as a substrate because we knew exactly how to treat it. Moving to molybdenum disulfide is like asking a master carpenter to suddenly start building homes out of liquid glass. The chemical processes for cleaning, etching, and doping 2D materials have been a black box. But Huawei has shifted the focus toward dry transfer methods, a way of layering materials that avoids the messy liquid chemicals that used to ruin the delicate atomic sheets. This is the industrial equivalent of discovering how to pour concrete instead of carving stone. It makes the entire process repeatable, predictable, and most importantly, export-proof. Consider the secondary supply chain impacts. Every time a new standard emerges, it ripples outward. If Huawei successfully proves that 2D-based RISC-V chips can handle routine tasks, they will effectively bypass the licensing requirements of companies like ARM or the design architectures of traditional silicon giants. They are building a proprietary sandbox where the rules are written in Nanjing, not in a corporate boardroom in California. This is why you see such intense focus on their smart city and intelligent vehicle initiatives. They aren't just selling phones, they are selling an entire stack of computing infrastructure that is functionally immune to external shutdowns. They are ensuring that their domestic market, which is the largest in the world, never faces a blackout event driven by foreign policy. Furthermore, there is the psychological component of this industry shift. When you introduce a new, non-silicon, non-Western standard, you create a gravitational pull for other nations, feeling the pressure of similar restrictions. Brazil, India, various blocs across the Middle East, they are all watching. They see a path where they don't have to grovel for access to the latest ASML lithography equipment. They see a future where they can build their own local capacity using open-source RISC-V and 2D materials. Huawei is not just exporting a chip, they are exporting the blueprint for technological independence. The fear in Washington isn't just about losing market share, it is about the collapse of the choke point strategy that has defined global policy for the last generation. If you're a US citizen, your tech ecosystem is built on the assumption that the best chips will always be made by a handful of companies using forbidden machines. But Huawei is building a parallel internet, a parallel AI infrastructure, and a parallel computing standard that doesn't rely on a single component the West can switch off. We are watching the creation of a technological iron curtain, and this time the barrier is physical. There is a catch. The industry has long been obsessed with the atomic gap, the space between a semiconductor and its insulator that ruins efficiency. Huawei's success depends on solving that gap at scale without the extreme precision of Western machines. They are using zipper materials and new chemical bonding. If they succeed, they don't just catch up, they leapfrog. If they fail, they are left with a mountain of expensive, underperforming hardware. This is the ultimate high-stakes gamble. Huawei is betting they can rewrite the laws of manufacturing through volume and grit. They have already mass-produced over 381 different chip designs in the last 6 years to perfect this methodology. They are on track to match 1.4 nanometer density by 2031, which puts them within striking distance of the pinnacle of what TSMC can produce. That is not just catching up, that is a total reorganization of power. The question isn't whether they can make the chip, it is whether they can make it fast enough to convince the world that the Western way of computing is, quite literally, out of time. Regulators in Washington fear the modular shift. We were so used to the idea of a central monolithic processor that we forgot the power of specialization. Huawei's strategy is to build thousands of highly specialized, efficient chips that are cheap enough for everything from wall sensors to car neural networks. They are moving the battlefield from a centralized war of attrition into a decentralized swarm-style dominance. By making these chips good enough for almost everything, they flood the market, setting a standard everyone else must follow or become obsolete. Beyond the economics, there is the sheer logistical reality. A single monolithic chip requires a single monolithic supply chain. It requires high-purity chemicals, extreme precision, and a stable political environment. By moving to a modular specialized approach, Huawei is distributing its risks. If one factory goes down or one material source is blocked, the rest of the ecosystem survives. It is the difference between a glass vase and a pile of sand. One drop can shatter the vase, but you cannot shatter sand. The transition to this modular 2D-based future forces a fundamental reconsideration of compute density. We are transitioning from the era of the general-purpose processor to the era of the functional fabric, where the hardware itself is tailored for the specific task at hand. This transformation occurs at a critical junction in the global geopolitical climate. As countries grapple with the reality of digital sovereignty, the ability to manufacture, control, and iterate on one's own hardware becomes the ultimate currency of influence. By open sourcing the instruction set and utilizing abundant, non-precious metal materials, Huawei is effectively lowering the barrier to entry for the entire developing world, democratizing hardware development in a way that will render the current, restrictive gatekeeper model of semiconductor fabrication unsustainable. In the broader context of industrial evolution, we are witnessing the obsolescence of the mega factory. For decades, the economies of scale were driven by massive capital expenditure, the multi-billion-dollar clean rooms, and the sheer brutal force of R&D budgets focused on perfecting silicon at a single site. Huawei's shift suggests a different model, distributed, localized, and modular. It is the difference between a centrally commanded army and a guerrilla movement. By optimizing for local production and utilizing alternative materials, they are effectively turning every regional node into a potential hub of innovation. This creates a compounding effect on global research. Once you lower the technical and financial barrier to entry, you invite thousands of labs, startups, and academic institutions that were previously excluded from the Silicon Gold Rush. They aren't just adopting a new chip, they are adopting a new framework for research, a shift from the brute force silicon approach to an elegant engineering methodology where performance is derived from clever architectural trade-offs rather than raw manufacturing precision. Furthermore, this pivot has profound implications for data privacy and cybersecurity. When an entire stack of computing is built on an instruction set and material stack that is fully owned, verified, and controlled by a sovereign entity, the traditional backdoor threats inherent in using third-party globalized hardware chains are mitigated. It is a return to a closed-loop trust model, which is highly attractive to nations seeking to insulate their critical infrastructure from foreign influence. Every major paradigm shift in history started with a piece of hardware that looked like a toy, dismissed by incumbents as too slow or too weird to be real. The incumbents always look at new tech through the lens of their old, expensive machinery and say it doesn't match their metrics. They are right, it doesn't. But it matches a far more dangerous set of metrics: availability, sovereignty, and scale. If you want to know where the next generation of global power is being written, look away from the multi-billion-dollar factories in the West and look at the labs in Nanjing. The world is splitting into two trajectories. One is fighting to keep the old way alive. The other is building the path out of the trap. The most important technology of the next decade won't be the fastest chip. It will be the one that works when the supply chain for everything else has been severed. Huawei has shown the world the door. They have proven there is a way to compute outside the iron cage of export controls. The transition won't be overnight, but it is now inevitable. The roadmap isn't just being redrawn, it is being replaced. The people who are paying attention now are the ones who will understand the world coming, long before the rest realize the ground beneath them has already shifted. That primitive device on the lab bench I mentioned at the start? It was never meant to be a finished product. It was a sign that the iron cage was already unlocked. This is Signal Frontier. I'll see you in the next one.